nice, isn't it?
Hi, Bob.
Cheers. There she is. Where she is.
Thanks so much for coming.
Here, right?
I'm just going to stand up with these paintings right there.
I see Dale over there. Really, I don't know. He knows where he uses space and so many workers.
Margaret Prentice's taught. This show must be quite a shock for those of you who know Peggy's work. Peggy taught printmaking at the University of Oregon for 26 years, and she is internationally known as a printmaker and papermaker. Her prints are in over 55 public collections, including the British Museum, the New York Public Library, the Getty Museum, and the National Library of New Zealand. This exhibition of paintings is her debut of a completely new direction. As you can see, the paintings are absolutely beautiful, and the genesis of them is actually quite a beautiful story as well. So here is the artist to talk about her work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming out today on a rainy afternoon. It's so nice to see you all. I know some of you who may not have even known that I started painting.
Peggy can't hear her.
Yeah.
Oh, talk louder.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I might have to sit later, but I'll stand for now. So I've had, one reason I'm painting now is because I've had a number of physical problems, physical issues, and it kind of forced me to go from standing and running around very actively to sitting. And so that's actually one reason that I started painting. But about...
Something good about them,
To explain kind of this change, in '09, I was quite sick with cancer and had complications with that. And so it took around 3 years for me to kind of come back. And then I had this very tragic accident and broke my left foot off my leg in a snowstorm. You remember about 3 years ago we had a foot of snow overnight on March 15th, and all the trees were in full bloom. My magnolias were in full bloom, and I got up in the morning and noticed that my magnolia was on the ground, broke off at the ground. And I immediately grabbed a broom and ran outside and started knocking heavy wet snow off of the bushes and trees, and I got almost completely done. I was on the last rhododendron bush, and I lost my balance and fell over, but the snow was so heavy and wet that it wouldn't let my foot move. It was like in concrete. And I fell over, and my foot stayed right there. And so my leg was here, the foot was here, and luckily my neighbor heard me scream, and he kind of got me inside the house, and an ambulance couldn't come for 2 hours because there were so many accidents. And so a fire engine came an hour later, and 3 firemen came in the house and started an IV on me, and they stayed with me for another hour, and then they took me to the hospital and I had surgery. So that's also, I have lots of metal in this left ankle, and keeps me moving very slowly these days. So with all of that, when I was in chemo, I have an identical twin sister, and she came out to take care of me. She lives in Indiana, and she likes to paint. So she was in my printmaking studio painting, and I was in the house kind of sitting around reading, watching TV, and she said, "You can't just sit around like that. You need to get up and make some artwork or something." And I was like, "Oh, well, no, I can't stand." And she said, "Well, you can sit." So she said, okay, you can sit at the kitchen table and I'll get you some oil paints and a little table easel. And we'll set a still life up on the table and you can paint it. And I said, okay. So she did. And she went out and got me these little brushes and paints and a piece of glass for a palette. And I set up a still life and started painting. And it was just so fascinating. It just was immediate. I loved it. And I loved the observation. And, you know, in printmaking, drawing is so fundamental to printmaking. So I've been drawing my whole life. And I love drawing. And I love color. And color is an issue in printmaking because if you have 8 colors in prints, and most of my prints did have color, but still, you know, very often another color is another block, another plate, and many times through the press for color. So 6, 8 colors, you know, can seem like a lot in a print. And when I started painting, it was just hundreds of colors. I could just mix another color, try this, try that. And I have just been fascinated with it ever since. I brought some sketchbooks because all of my previous work was from my imagination. None of it was in, quote, realism, as this exhibition is. But the only realism that I did previously, I'll just stay right where you are, was when I traveled. And I often traveled internationally, and I kind of wanted to remember where I was. So when I was, this is very typical, I would just sit in a place, in a spot, and I would really want to document that place. So this is in Japan, and a temple in Japan, and it was very typical, but I never showed anybody these watercolors. Because they're just, you know, they're just memories, they're little private pieces. But this was my previous experience with painting and documenting a particular place, a particular moment, and how I felt being there. This experience is what started these paintings. It really came to this, and after being so sick, when I finally could go outside again, I valued it so much to be out in the wind, out in the rain, out in the color of nature. And I really wanted to paint what I saw, and I wanted nature to teach me about the colors that were there and documenting that. So all of these paintings are a kind of documentation of a particular moment when I was there and how I felt being there. So, you know, many artists paint landscape, and they paint for different reasons. Some artists who paint landscape may want to just use a kind of suggested compositional elements that they're looking at and kind of throw in their own palette of colors, change colors dramatically from what they're seeing. But I really don't want to do that. I want, if it's a dark, dreary, misty day, then I want to paint a dark, dreary, misty day. I want to paint exactly what it was like and my memory being there. This is one of those dark, misty days. And I do occasionally go out and paint plein air. I mean, I like to be out in the landscape painting plein air, and my sister usually comes to visit in the summer, and we go out painting together. Did I mention she's my identical twin? And so we both like to do the same things. And so she comes out and I paint plein air. But usually when someone paints plein air, they don't paint much larger than 11 by 14 or maybe 12 by 16 would be considered fairly large, because a plein air painting needs to be finished in a couple of hours. And so there are plein air paintings in this exhibition. They're the 11 by 14s. I think there's in the corner over there, there's a 12 by 16 that's of the King Estate Winery on a dark, cloudy, I think it was October day. So the small 11 by 14s were plein air, but the rest of these, I would go out with a camera and take a lot of different photographs and then put those photographs up on my computer and really study the different light, color, composition that are in the different ones, and then select one that I wanted to paint. So I don't change things around. I don't want to move trees around, throw in, take trees out or change the clouds or anything like that. I really want it to be the light and the mist and the color that it was that day. So if anybody has any questions about anything I've just been talking about.
Did you have any challenges with the color interpretation on the computer from the picture? Was it off or?
No. No, it's very, very much.
Very much what you said.
I don't change the color, with the computer or anything. I don't even have Photoshop on my computer, so
Right.
I don't do any of that. Yeah, no, it's very much just the way it
Right.
was. Yeah. I don't, some artists will have a particular palette that they want to use and work with, and they kind of always use that palette in all of their paintings. And sometimes you can say, well, I recognize that's so-and-so's artwork because I recognize the palette. But, I really don't want to do that, because I want to explore all different kinds of color, all different kinds of light, all different kinds, so in being out in nature, looking at different light and color and atmosphere and taking photographs of that teaches me more and more and more about color. The other thing about these paintings, I didn't want any architecture in these paintings, because there's a couple of little exceptions in these paintings, but when you put architecture in a painting, it becomes a story about people. It brings people into the image and say, oh, there's a house, who lives there? What's going on there? It's a kind of stimulates storytelling in the viewer. And I really wanted all of these paintings to be about the expanse of the landscape, the space, the depth in it, and invite the viewer into the landscape. There's a feeling of being able to kind of spread out and wander around in that. And that's another reason that I like a smooth surface on the paintings and not a lot of thick paint, because that also will tend to bring the viewer's attention to the surface of the painting, and you're kind of always there. And clearly it is paint, and there's brush strokes and all of that, but then I also want that space and the feeling of visually being able to just move right into the painting to be easy for the viewer. Yeah?
I have a couple of questions. What medium do you use?
This is all oil.
Oil, but what do you?
Oh,
use
medium.
oil?
I use liquid.
You do use liquid, okay.
Mhm.
And
So,
what
yeah.
goes with it?
Yeah, I use liquid, and I don't use paint thinner hardly at all. I know a lot of painters will, do an underpainting with paint thinner, but I use liquid right away. In the underpainting also.
And that's another thing I was going to ask, because you really get the glowing. So you're just painting directly on a white canvas? You don't?
Well, it's a primed canvas.
On canvas, yeah. And then you just start your washes off
Mhm. Yeah, so every painting has a complete underpainting under everything you see. Whatever you see is like maybe the third coating, you know. So it all, each one has a full underpainting. And what I have found is that using liquin, and for some of you don't know that much about the medium of painting, liquin is a medium that will tend to dry out oil paint a little quicker than oil. If you just put oil paint straight on a canvas, it might take 3 days to dry, or even 4. And with liquin, it'll dry overnight. So then I can paint the next day straight onto that paint. The other thing that I discovered accidentally is that by using liquin on all the different layers, so every single bit of paint on here has been mixed with liquin, it creates this incredibly even surface. And sometimes when you see oil paintings, you'll see some matte kind of paint that's kind of matte, other paint that's kind of shiny, and it can look spotty. And that's one reason that painters will varnish their paintings after they finish, so that the whole surface will be shiny. But by painting with liquin through all the paint, it creates this very satiny, even surface that doesn't have any changes in it. So a friend of mine who's a painter in Portland, I went up to her, Sherry Wolf, some of you might know her paintings, she's a fabulous artist. She was giving an artist talk, and I asked her if her paintings were varnished, because they had a kind of satiny look, and she said, well, she doesn't use varnish, she uses liquin. And I had never heard of anyone varnishing with liquin before, but she just then, at the very end, dilutes liquin with a little paint thinner, and then paints just pure liquin over the surface of the whole painting, and that, seals it. And so, but these are the result of having that in the paint, and it does create a very even, matte, kind of a satiny surface, but not shiny, and I don't want my paintings really to be shiny. So, a little technical thing. Yeah.
Are the underpainting sort of a one color? Are they heading toward the end result, all those underpaintings, or are they themselves where you are in your thoughts?
Yeah, the underpaintings are wanting to locate major shapes in areas, so like where the horizon line is. And yet, some people do underpaintings that are just value, like they'll do the whole underpainting in sepia, and just like a gray and white value painting first. But I don't really see the point of that. So if I know that this is going to be a general kind of a brownish color, like this kind of a brown, I probably the underpainting would just do that, but it would just be a simple shape.
Mm-hmm.
And then this kind of a dark line, and then just to kind of locate where the top of this, it might be very, ragged brush strokes. Gray. So it does have a little color, but not the detail. There's no detail in the underpainting. Just locating shapes, and the drawing is in there.
And then it kind of helps you to move further into.
Yeah, and I don't draw the image with anything but a brush. So it's not a detailed drawing either. It's even when there's a little bit, of information, it would just be that shape, and then where the horizon line is, none of that detail would be in there, but maybe where this edge of that was, and then where this is. So, yeah, no detail. And I don't draw with anything but a small brush. Yeah.
Has all that come from a pencil drawing prior to that?
No, it comes from the photograph.
You're drawing directly from the photograph onto the canvas?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
How was it transitioning from small to large surfaces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I painted small when I didn't really know. I hadn't painted since college when I started painting in '09, when I was in the middle of chemo, and back in the '60s, when I was in college, like '63 or something, we just painted abstractly, so we didn't do any realism at that time either. So I didn't really have much experience painting. And also the medium and everything, we used Damar varnish, it was kind of the old-fashioned mixing a medium. So I started small, 11 by 14, and because I couldn't, I was painting still lifes on the kitchen table, and then my sister was visiting from Indiana. She was about to go home. And I said, well, you can't be out here and then not see the ocean. So we took one day, and she drove us to Hasita Head Beach. And then I took a lot of photographs of Hasita Head Beach, and she did too. And we drove back, and then I started, I put those on my computer, and I started painting from the photographs on a laptop computer at the kitchen table. And that kind of made a transition. So my first little 11 by 14 paintings were of the coast, a lot of Hasita Head Beach. And then that was kind of my learning stage. But, I've been drawing since I was young. I've taught drawing for many, many years. I understand composition. I understood color. There really wasn't any learning curve except the actual material of oil paint and brushes. And then somebody said to me, oh yeah, oil paint. That's kind of like moving so much toothpaste around with a stick, isn't it? And I thought, there's something to that. That's kind of when you haven't ever, it's like all this stuff, it's very strange. So that's my learning curve, was the actual medium and paints and color. The medium and the paint and the brushes and different kinds of brushes. And then the layering, of course, in watercolor was the only experience I'd had before, and that you go light to dark, and in oil painting you go dark to light. So there's that. But I love learning new things, and actually it's been a very great gift, and I realized that if I hadn't gotten sick, I probably never would have even thought to paint. I would be still making prints, because it was really just the physical necessity of sitting down. Because I had my whole retirement planned out. I was going to retire, and then I was going to do artist residencies all over the world. I was going to travel and do all of these things, and then life brought me to an abrupt stop, a full stop, and it said, sit down, you're staying here. And so when that kind of a thing happens in your life, you just embrace that. And I was glad that I was actually surviving. So I wasn't resentful or anything. I just embraced that and thought, well, what can I do with what I've got? And then you look around and say, well, I can paint. And when I started going outside again, it was just such an adventure, and I had so much appreciation of nature and the colors in nature that I just wanted to explore that. And I had a lot of opportunity to travel internationally during my career, and I'm glad I did, because I don't feel like I've missed anything. And actually the one thing that I never really have had very much time to do is explore Oregon. So now I want to do that. I want to go to the Malheur more. I've hardly ever been over there and paint over there. So there's so much here in Oregon, and I feel very, very fortunate to be here, to live here.
One more question. When did you start this series?
This series started January of 14, and it finished in January 15.
Amazing.
So the little yellow twig dogwood on the very left, that is Delta Ponds, and that was the last painting that was in January this year. And yeah, there's a lot of Delta. So I did the storm clouds. The storm clouds came because last Christmas in December 13, just at the end of 13, I was thinking, before then I was just painting these small little 11 by 14 paintings. And I would just go out and kind of say, well, this is a nice composition, I'll just paint this. This is a nice, I'll just paint this. But during that Christmas vacation, I don't have any family here, so usually I'm kind of alone during Christmas, and I was thinking, what do I really care about exploring as a subject matter? And I thought, what I really love are storm clouds. It might be the Scotch-Irish in me, I don't know. But I love storms, I love storm clouds. I grew up in Indiana where there's big storm clouds in the summer, the thunderheads, etc., which I love. And I thought, well, this is our storm cloud season. I was right in it, it was January. So I thought, I'm going to start a series of storm cloud paintings, and I've always worked in series with my prints too. So by doing that, a kind of a subject matter that you can have a lot of variety with, it gives you a chance to explore all the different faces of the storm clouds. And so these are all different storms on different landscape, etc., but they have that in common. And then, I don't know if you remember last spring, we had a lot of forest fires in southern Oregon. And it brought fabulous sunsets here. In fact, the news would put on these sunsets and say, look at the beautiful sunset. So there's like 4 paintings of sunsets, and that they were painted at that time. Kind of in June, I think it was. So this is one where you see the actual sun is setting. But the one there is the sun setting here, and it's shining back at those clouds. And then there's another one, I think, maybe in the window. There's 3 or 4, that's another sunset painting, right? The 2, you know, in the middle there. Those were the last paintings I did. And then summer hit, the storm clouds left, my sister visited, we did a little plein air painting. And then in October, I just thought, well, am I going to continue the storm clouds, or am I going to start another series? And I decided to start a series of wetlands, because when I was painting the storm clouds, there would be so much water in the fields that I really liked the puddling of water where the tire tracks, or some puddling in the fields that would reflect the sky. And so I decided, and I love to walk over at Delta Ponds, so I decided to paint a wetland series. And that really, I probably still continue that. The next paintings will probably be part of that, because I really haven't done very many, maybe 5 paintings or so. So I love to walk over at Delta Ponds, and many of these are Delta Ponds. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One is about when you go and take pictures, do you spend a lot of time doing your setup, and what settings would be best for that photo, or do you kind of go on auto?
Auto.
Okay, and my other question.
No, because the wind is blowing. The clouds are moving. In 30 seconds it's going to be different. So I just have my camera, I just go, oh, click, click, click. So I take a lot of photos.
Okay. My other one is about whether you see any other, this is exploring oil painting as well as the different subjects. Are there any other media you're kind of yearning to dig into?
No, well, I'm not giving up printmaking. Let's put it that way. But I am downsizing. I am reducing my studio practice. And I live near the university now in a big house with 2 big studios in it, a full printmaking studio. And I'm going to, in about a year, move into a condo. It's about half that size, has 2 smaller studios in it. And and I have a lot of friends that have etching presses. So I'm not worried about finding a press. And then the Eugene printmakers they're just now forming, I should, a little plug for Eugene printmakers. They're just now forming a nonprofit organization called Eugene Printmakers, and you're still calling it that. So that's going to have a kind of an opening pretty soon, I think. And it's, some of you know where, is it, no, what's the ceramic studio called?
Clay Space.
Clay Space. So, you know, some of you might know where Clay Space is. Well, the new Eugene Printmakers is right next door on Polk.
2nd and Polk.
2nd and Polk. So they're going to have an open house soon. When is it?
Well, we're going to have studio visitation. You can come and check out the space next Saturday and the following Saturday. And
So
we
next
hope to
Saturday, the
open
following
April
Saturday,
1st.
10 to 1, they're going to have, you can check out the space. And they're kind of, you know, anybody who's interested in becoming a member, they're looking for members. And so I'm donating a lot of my printmaking studio and equipment to the Eugene Printmakers. And so it's a very good time. It's timely for me and for them. And I'm thinking, you know, that if I do more printmaking, I love engraving in copper. And I haven't done it in quite a while, and it's often relatively small, and there's no acid involved. It's just, sometimes I call it backpack printmaking, because you just throw your copper plate in your backpack and a few burins, and then you just engrave, you know, wherever you are. So that and some maybe monotype or woodcuts I might, or dry point, you know, I might do. But I'm not going to have a big printmaking studio practice anymore. It's really going to be focused on painting. I'm not going to, I just really want to paint now. It's, you know, the color and the space and just the act of painting. I really, really love it. I just, you know, it's so different than printmaking. It's so direct, you know, and printmaking's a little indirect. So it's a completely new life experience for me, and I really expect to do this the rest of my life, you know, to focus on painting and drawing, not to leave out drawing. Yeah.
What brand of brushes do you use and what sizes? Or do you favor? Maybe just a brand you favor?
Well, I paint with a lot of flats. I paint with small brushes, I don't know, maybe like down to a 2, or, you know, all the way to maybe a 14, 15, 16, you know. And I like filberts, and I can't,
As in like
right now I can't think of the brand.
Connoisseur or any of those particular,
What?
the Connoisseur brand? or-
Yeah, I like Connoisseur. Uh-huh.
I said, no, because you're painting so much, I just wondered if one is holding up better than the other.
Um,
I can ask you another time.
I think, yes, that's true. I have one brush that I really love, and it's kind of a big brush, and it's a Grumbacher, which I would never think that a Grumbacher would be the, but I started using it. I just love it. It's the only Grumbacher brush I own. And I use it for big clouds, like this painting, you know, just, it has these big arm strokes. And that's the other thing, my prints were often fairly large, and I always felt like I was practicing and kind of playing when I was painting 11 by 14. I really don't like to paint small. And these are really just as small as I kind of want to paint, but when you're out plein air, you really have to paint small. So that's another reason that plein air is not one of my favorite things to do. I really prefer painting in the studio and painting larger, but I do want to paint a variety of sizes. But I do especially like this. And then there's a 2 foot by 4 foot around the corner. So most of these are Oregon, but not all of them are Oregon. The one on the brick wall there is Whidbey Island. And I have a couple of friends who actually were just visiting the past few days. They left yesterday, live on Whidbey. And so when I started the wetland series, I went up there, and so there's that one, and then just to the right of that on this wall is the 4 foot painting, and that's Whidbey Island also, the wetlands on Whidbey. And this painting, I have a cousin that's about my age, and she lives in France. So this is the only painting that is another country. And this is near her house in southern France. And then, let's see, it was summer before last. My sister and I went to the Adirondack Mountains in New York to paint plein air. 100 painters. The Plein Air magazine set up this thing at a small college in the Adirondacks on the lakes there, and made room and board for 100 painters. No workshops, no lectures, no nothing, just painters coming to paint everywhere, in the woods and the waterfalls and everything. And my sister and I went out there, and that was my first plein air painting kind of experience. And we painted, and so then I took some photographs when I was out there. So this was painted this year, but the photograph was taken, you know, when we were there, which is 2.5 years ago. This one, and there's another one somewhere.
In the front window.
In the window?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also the Adirondacks. There it is. And these 3 paintings, well, that one, the yellow ochre field, these 2, this one, and this one around the corner here. I found this field I loved. I just fell in love with this field. And it's the field right off the Harrisburg exit when you're going to Portland. And if you just take the Harrisburg exit and go east, you just go down a country road, not very, very short. There's a fence, and then the very first opening in that fence where the trucks pull in is this field. And whatever they were growing in that field, the stubble that was left in the winter, was this incredible color of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, these green and brown and blue. And I kept wanting to go back and paint those colors. Then it had this kind of violet in the hills going up, the foothills. So this is all the same field on different days and different storms. So I kind of wish I knew whose field that was and say, there's 4 paintings.
Your clouds are very animated and beautiful and outstanding. And who among the painters, in terms of their mastery of clouds, most inspires you?
Oh dear.
Among them. festival or,
Well, yeah, and I guess, I don't really look at another painter's paintings, but, I mean, I like Turner, Constable, I love other painters' paintings, but in terms of
clouds seem to be one
clouds,
of your
I
great.
haven't really gone to, look. One of the things I think is somewhat dangerous to do for an artist to do is to go to other people's paintings to teach them to do something that they want to do right now. Like if I was painting a cloud, that would not be a good time to go look at somebody else's clouds, because it's just too, it's too close. To look at other people's paintings as a whole painting, the way they express themselves, maybe the brushstrokes, the kind of surface that's there, I think that is very valuable. And color, color. But you want to, painting for every single artist is like handwriting. You can't change, you have a unique handwriting. If you say, I like your handwriting, I want my handwriting to be like your handwriting, it would be very stilted, and it would, not look natural. It wouldn't have any energy and flow. So it's the same thing, in painting. You really just want to paint, and then discover what your own handwriting is in paint. Your own natural way of making brush strokes, your own natural way of drawing. Drawing is just like a handwriting. And I think that that's the biggest mistake that artists make, is that they don't trust themselves enough to know that it's, that who they are is going to naturally come out in their painting, and then that's part of the wonderful experience, is to discover, your own handwriting that's in the work. So I think the other most common mistake, it shouldn't call it a mistake really, but a common problem with painters, and I think early on I had more of a problem, is to overwork a painting. Work on it too long. When there's some when you see that there's an energy and a vitality in the brushstrokes and the color, and you've already put it down, then it's there. Trust that, instead of just kind of fixing it, picking at it, and fixing it too much, and then it kind of kills it. So that would be another kind of advice that I would give artists in general. Yeah.
Do you have some that just didn't work out and they're not here? You're not.
No, not. There's really? One painting is not here, but I like the painting very, very much. It's a painting of a chateau in France that's just here. It's this hill going up, and there's a wonderful chateau here. And it doesn't fit with these paintings, it's architecture, and I don't want any architecture in these paintings. So, but it has this light, all of that is exactly the same, and that painting's at home in my house. I think maybe there is, it wasn't a painting really that was part of this series, but I did paint one that was 12 by 16 that I don't really care for. It was a barge on the Erie Canal. When I was in New York in the Adirondacks, and then I visited a friend, and we went to the Erie Canal. And the Erie Canal goes all the way through, and it goes to Indiana. So growing up in Indiana, I was familiar with the Erie Canal, but I had never seen the beginning of the Erie Canal. So then we went there, and there was this interesting barge that kind of looked like a barge in Holland or something. And so I took some pictures of it, and I painted that, but I never cared for the painting that much. So, yeah.
Did you paint over them?
You mean change a painting completely?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't so far. you know, these are just this last year, so it's, you know, there's not super amount of history. So I'm not saying I never will, yeah.
So, seeing that you don't have any rejects, do you have days where it just isn't working? I mean, or other days that you paint and just go, wow, I'm amazing today.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Oh, good, you're real.
Yeah. Well, I don't paint every day. And I usually don't paint more than 3 or 4 hours in a day. That's, you know, I usually start around 1 and paint till 4, 4:30, or even 5, and that would be it, you know. Because then, you know, you're just tired. But, yeah, sometimes it's going well, and you know, the brush strokes are going well. You know, with the clouds, actually the clouds and the water reflections are so similar, because both are kind of there and not there, you know, they're so ephemeral. So it has a lot to do with that, you know, just getting the wind in the cloud, you know, and so it has so much to do with brush stroke and that atmosphere, you know, so you can't, it's important to be careful, but not too careful, you know, it has to have that energy, and I love that discovery. It's not like in, you know, there's control, and then there's, you know, the artistic, just the gesture. The gesture is so important too.
We want to thank Peggy for not afraid of taking the opportunity to switch from printmaking to painting, and I know she'll continue to probably answer a lot of questions, and I just thought maybe we can also move around and take a look at the work. Peggy will be here, join us for a glass of wine and some hors d'oeuvre there, and you know, if you want to move around, you're more than welcome.
I came the opening night, but it was so crowded that.
Thank you so much for coming. So did you get my email that I have? I don't know if you need some frames. I thought you said you needed some frames. Yeah, so they're at my house trying to.
I think of all the paintings.